The first time she noticed him, it was because he never looked up. Every morning followed the same rhythm. The glass doors slid open, the elevator hummed softly, and the woman CEO stepped onto the 32nd floor where power lived in polished marble and quiet fear. People sensed her before they saw her. Conversations paused. Laptops closed. Backs straightened. She had earned that reaction through years of sleepless nights, ruthless decisions, and the kind of discipline that left no room for weakness. Yet at the far end of the corridor, near the emergency exit, a janitor moved through the space as if he were invisible. His mop glided over the floor in slow, careful strokes. His eyes remained fixed downward, never once lifting to acknowledge the executives passing him. He worked with the caution of someone who knew the smallest mistake could cost him everything. Beside his cleaning cart sat a small pink backpack with a cartoon star stitched onto the front. It didn't belong in a place like this. It tugged at her attention more than she liked. She walked past him every day. Until that morning. She had been late. A board meeting loomed, and her phone buzzed nonstop with messages demanding answers she hadn't yet formed. As she turned the corner, she nearly collided with a little girl standing in the middle of the hallway. The child froze, eyes wide with fear. Behind her, the janitor rushed forward, placing himself between the girl and the CEO instinctively, his hands lifting in a flurry of movement. Then she realized his mouth wasn't moving at all. The girl's hands began to move too. Not random. Not playful. Purposeful. The CEO's breath caught in her throat. Sign language. She hadn't seen it in years, not like this. Not alive. Not urgent. Without thinking, she responded. Her hands felt stiff at first, as if the language had been sleeping inside her, waiting. She signed slowly, gently, asking if the girl was okay. The child stared at her, stunned, then her face crumpled with relief. Her hands flew faster now, words spilling out as if she'd been holding them in all morning. The janitor looked up. Really looked up. His eyes widened, shock rippling through his entire body. He signed to his daughter to slow down, then turned to the CEO, his movements careful, almost hesitant, as if afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly. They understood each other instantly. In that brief, fragile moment, the hallway disappeared. There were no titles. No hierarchy. No glass walls or security cameras. Just a father, a daughter, and a woman who remembered who she used to be. Then the illusion shattered. Ma'am? Security. Two guards approached, hands already hovering near their radios. Their eyes flicked from the janitor to the child, suspicion tightening their faces. This area is restricted, one of them said, his tone practiced and cold. We'll need you to step away. The CEO turned, confused. We know who you are, the other guard interrupted, already reaching for her elbow. But this situation needs to be handled. Handled. She glanced back at the janitor. He had gone pale. His hands trembled as he pulled his daughter closer, shielding her as if expecting punishment. The girl clung to him, her small fingers gripping his uniform like it was the only solid thing left in the world. I'm fine, the CEO said sharply. They're with me. The guards didn't listen. They rarely did. Whispers began to ripple through the corridor as doors cracked open and curious eyes peered out. The sight was absurd, humiliating, unreal. A CEO being escorted down her own hallway, while a janitor stood frozen, powerless, watching his world tilt. As they moved her toward the elevator, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Helplessness. Then she heard soft footsteps. The little girl broke free from her father's arms and ran. She planted herself in front of the CEO, tears streaming down her cheeks, hands shaking violently as she signed with all the strength her small body could muster. Please. Call my father. The words hit harder than any accusation ever had. The CEO dropped to her knees without caring who saw. She signed back, her hand steady despite the storm inside her chest, promising the girl she would help, that no one was taking her father away. The guards hesitated. Enough. The CEO said, standing slowly. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Step back. They did. Because authority, real authority, always remembered how to speak. She turned to the janitor, meeting his eyes fully for the first time. In them, she saw fear she recognized. The fear of being misunderstood. Of being disposable. Of loving someone so deeply it made the world dangerous. And in that moment, standing in a hallway she had ruled for years, she realized something she had forgotten. Power meant nothing if it couldn't protect the voiceless. And this was only the beginning. Daniel sat on the edge of the chair, hands folded so tightly in his lap that his knuckles had turned white. The office around him felt unreal. Floor-to-ceiling windows, soft leather chairs, a table that probably cost more than his yearly salary. He had cleaned this room many times before, always after hours, always quickly, never daring to touch anything more than necessary. Now he was inside it while the sun was still high, his daughter seated beside him, swinging her legs nervously. Sophia watched the woman CEO with wide eyes. The CEO dismissed the assistants with a single look. The door closed. Silence settled, thick and heavy. Daniel immediately began to sign an apology. His movements were fast, frantic, as if the words themselves were trying to escape him. He signed that he hadn't meant to cause trouble, that he knew rules were rules, that he would take his daughter and leave right away, that he didn't want special treatment, that he didn't want to be a problem. Sophia tugged at his sleeve, signing for him to slow down. The CEO watched, her chest tightening with every gesture. She had seen this before. Not here, not in this building, but long ago, in a small kitchen with flickering lights and unpaid bills stacked on the table. Her mother's hands had moved the same way when fear took over, when dignity felt fragile. She raised her hands gently. "You don't need to apologize." Daniel froze. His eyes flicked up to her face, searching for mockery, for impatience, for the subtle cruelty people often hid behind polite smiles. He found none. She asked his name. "Danielle." She asked Sophia's. "Sophia." The girl smiled shyly and signed that the office looked like a castle. The CEO smiled back, something warm loosening in her chest. Daniel explained, slowly now, about the mornings. About the daycare that closed without warning. About the neighbors who helped until they couldn't anymore. About the nights he worked late, the mornings he worked early, and the spaces in between where he tried to be both parents at once. He signed that Sophia stayed quiet. That she knew the rules. That she sat in corners and read. That she never touched anything. That he taught her to be invisible because invisible was safe. The CEO felt a sharp sting behind her eyes. Invisible children grew into invisible adults. She knew that too well. She asked about Sophia's mother. Daniel's hands hesitated. Then slowed. Then trembled. Gone. 2 years. Illness. No warning. No goodbye. Sophia leaned against her father, her head resting against his arm. The CEO noticed how naturally they fit together, how every movement accounted for the other. This wasn't just a father bringing his child to work. This was survival stitched together by love and exhaustion. The CEO stood and walked to the window. Below them, the city pulsed with motion, ambition, and indifference. She had built her life climbing above all of it, believing distance meant safety. She turned back. "Daniel," she said aloud, then signed alongside her words so he wouldn't miss a single one. No one should have to choose between a job and their child. Daniel's breath caught. He signed that he wasn't asking for charity. That he worked hard. That he was loyal. That he was grateful for what he had. "I know," she signed. "That's why this matters." She asked him about his skills. Not just cleaning, but everything. Organization. Maintenance. Scheduling. Attention to detail. He answered honestly, surprised anyone cared. She asked Sophia what she wanted to be when she grew up. Sophia's eyes lit up. Her hands danced as she signed that she wanted to help people talk to each other when they couldn't understand. That she wanted to be a bridge. The CEO laughed softly, the sound breaking something open inside her. A bridge. Of course she did. When Daniel was escorted out later that day, it wasn't by security. It was by an assistant carrying folders, explaining benefits, hours, and support programs that hadn't existed that morning. Daniel walked carefully, as if one wrong step might wake him from a dream. Sophia skipped beside him. By the next week, the building felt different. Meetings began with interpreters present. Signs appeared alongside spoken announcements. Managers fumbled awkwardly through basic hand movements, laughing at themselves, trying again. Some resisted. Some complained. The CEO listened, then reminded them firmly that inclusion wasn't optional. Daniel noticed the change in the smallest ways. People looked at him now. Really looked. They smiled. They signed clumsily hello. They asked about Sophia. For the first time since his wife's death, he felt seen without feeling exposed. One evening, long after the offices had emptied, Daniel finished his shift and found the CEO still at her desk. Papers were scattered everywhere, her heels kicked off beneath the table. She looked tired. Human. She signed to him, asking if he had a moment. He nodded. She told him about her mother. About growing up translating doctor visits and bills. About learning early that the world wasn't built for silence. About forgetting that truth as success piled higher and higher. Daniel listened, tears slipping down his face unchecked. Not because of sadness, but because someone powerful had trusted him with something fragile. Sophia watched them both, her eyes thoughtful. As they left that night, Daniel held his daughter's hand a little tighter. For the first time, the building no longer felt like a place that could swallow them whole. It felt like somewhere they might belong. The change didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, like light at dawn, almost unnoticed until the darkness was gone. Daniel felt it the first Monday morning when he walked into the building and no one rushed past him. A young analyst stopped near the elevators, smiled awkwardly, and lifted her hands in a careful, uncertain greeting. Daniel returned the sign, surprised. She beamed as if she had just been given a gift. Sophia noticed it too. She sat at a small desk that had been placed in a corner of the break room, coloring while her father worked nearby. People passed and waved to her. Some knelt down, asking her questions through slow, exaggerated signs. She corrected them with serious patience, her small hands confident. For the first time, she wasn't hiding. Daniel should have felt relief. Instead, fear followed him like a shadow. He had lived too long knowing how quickly kindness could disappear. He waited for the moment someone would decide this was all a mistake. That he had been allowed too much space, too much dignity. Every time his phone buzzed, his stomach tightened. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. The CEO wanted to see him. Again. His hands shook as he signed goodbye to Sophia, promising he'd be back in a few minutes. She squeezed his fingers, signing that he was brave, the same way he did for her before school performances. He didn't feel brave. The office door closed behind him, softer this time, but the silence still pressed down on his chest. The CEO stood by the window, her reflection faint against the city beyond. She turned slowly, studying his face as if measuring something unseen. Daniel signed first, the old instinct rising. He thanked her. He said he understood if things needed to change. He said he could adjust, he could do nights again, he could manage. She watched his hands, then raised her own. Stop. The single sign cut through his spiral. She signed that she hadn't called him in to take anything away. She signed that she was asking for his help. That confused him more than anything else. She explained that complaints had arrived. Not about him, but about the changes. Some executives felt uncomfortable. Others said the company was moving too fast, that accessibility was expensive, that this wasn't what they'd signed up for. Daniel's shoulders slumped. He had known this was coming. She signed that she wanted him in the meeting where those complaints would be discussed. Daniel's heart pounded violently. He shook his head, hands flying. He signed that he wasn't educated. That he wasn't important enough. That he cleaned floors. That people wouldn't listen. She stepped closer. She signed slowly, deliberately, making sure every word landed. They will listen because you live the reality they pretend not to see. The conference room was full. Long table. Sharp suits. Polite smiles stretched too thin. Daniel stood near the wall, feeling every eye settle on him like weight. Sophia sat beside the CEO, legs dangling, her presence silent but powerful. The meeting began with words he couldn't hear but could feel in the room. Tension. Resistance. Doubt. Then the CEO raised her hand. She signed. The room stilled. She explained who Daniel was. Not his job title, but his life. His skills. His responsibility. His love for his daughter. She spoke about access not as charity, but as intelligence. About voices lost not because they were weak, but because no one bothered to listen. Then she turned to Daniel. Your turn. His throat tightened. His hands trembled. For a moment, he saw himself as he had always been seen. Small. Replaceable. Silent. Then he felt Sophia's eyes on him. He stepped forward. He signed about mornings filled with fear. About teaching his daughter to be quiet so she wouldn't be punished. About working harder than everyone else just to be allowed to stay. About loving a child so fiercely it hurt. The interpreter's voice cracked as she translated. No one interrupted. No one looked away. When he finished, the room was silent in a way Daniel had never experienced. Respectful. One executive cleared his throat and admitted he had never considered what it cost to be unheard. Another asked how they could do better. The questions came slowly, carefully, honestly. After the meeting, Daniel sat alone in the hallway, his hands aching, his body exhausted. The CEO joined him, sitting on the floor without hesitation, her back against the wall. She signed that change always scared people who had never been forced to change. She signed that he had been brave. Daniel shook his head, smiling through tears. No, he signed. I was visible. That evening, Sophia ran down the hallway toward him, laughing, her hands flying as she told him everyone had clapped. He lifted her into his arms, holding her tightly. For the first time, he believed the future might not demand silence from them. And somewhere deep inside the building, something old and rigid had finally begun to bend. The night of the annual company event arrived quietly, wrapped in soft lights and polished smiles. The kind of night designed to celebrate success, numbers, and growth. Daniel almost didn't go. He stood in his small apartment, adjusting the borrowed suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders, watching Sophia spin in front of the mirror. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair neatly tied back, her hands already moving as she practiced the signs she had memorized over and over. They had been invited. Not as an exception. Not as a gesture. As part of the company. When they arrived, the room stilled in a way Daniel had learned to recognize. Not the old kind of silence that erased him, but a new one, curious and warm. People smiled, waved, signed. Someone handed Sophia a small badge with her name printed clearly beneath the words, Guest of Honor. She stared at it as if it might disappear. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had spent years preparing himself to leave quietly, to accept whatever scraps of dignity the world allowed. He had never prepared himself to be welcomed. The CEO stood near the stage, scanning the room. When she saw them, she didn't wave from across the hall. She walked toward them, heels forgotten, hands already lifting in greeting. She knelt in front of Sophia, signing slowly, carefully, asking if she was nervous. Sophia nodded, then signed back that she was excited. That she wanted to speak clearly. That she didn't want to mess up. The CEO smiled and signed that courage wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest. The lights dimmed. People took their seats. Music faded. The CEO stepped onto the stage, applause filling the room. Daniel felt it in his chest like distant thunder. He sat straighter, his hands resting on his knees, Sophia's small fingers intertwined with his. The CEO spoke about the year's achievements, about innovation and growth. Then her tone shifted. She talked about something harder to measure. Something easier to ignore. Belonging. She told the story without names at first. Of a hallway. Of a little girl. Of hands moving through tears. Of a man who loved his child enough to be invisible for her safety. The room grew still, every eye fixed on her. Then she looked directly at Daniel and Sophia. She invited them to join her. Daniel's legs felt weak as he stood. Sophia squeezed his hand and stepped forward first, fearless. They walked to the stage together, the distance feeling impossibly long and impossibly short all at once. The CEO knelt beside Sophia and held the microphone while signing every word. Sophia took a breath. Her hands shook at first, then steadied. She signed about her father. About how he cleaned floors so people wouldn't slip. About how he packed her lunches with notes she couldn't hear but could feel. About how he taught her that silence didn't mean weakness. The interpreter's voice broke more than once. When Sophia finished, the room rose as one. The applause wasn't loud to Daniel, but he felt it in the vibrations beneath his feet, in the way the air seemed to move around him. He dropped to one knee, pulling Sophia into his arms, tears soaking into her dress without shame. The CEO placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder and signed one final sentence, not just for him, but for everyone watching. No one here is just anything. In the weeks that followed, the changes became permanent. Policies turned into culture. Training turned into understanding. Accessibility became expectation, not exception. Daniel no longer avoided eye contact. Sophia no longer whispered her hands. And the CEO, once known only for her power, became known for something far rarer. She listened. Years later, when Sophia stood on a different stage, older now, confident and proud, interpreting for leaders who finally understood the value of every voice, Daniel watched from the audience with quiet tears. He thought back to a single hallway. A single moment. A single request signed through fear and hope. Please. Call my father. And he understood then that some words, once answered, can change everything.